The Carolina Panthers have been one of the more aggressive teams so far in free agency, and rightfully so. So in this video, we're going to talk about the Carolina Panthers and why I think they are trending in the right direction in 2025. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So I think the best way to start the video is by talking about what this team has actually done in free agency, because they've been one of the more active teams so far in the free agency process. As you can see, they've brought in guys like Tershawn Horton on a 3-year, $54 million deal, Trevon Moehrig, 3-year deal, Patrick Jones, 2-year deal, Bobby Brown, 3-year deal, Rico Dowell, 1-year deal, Christian Roseboom on a 1-year deal, re-signed a bunch of players, and also got ahead of the contract of JC. So now when you look at the depth chart for the Carolina Panthers, you sort of have this really fun mixture of a lot of players from last year's squad with some players from, the free agency process. You look at the offense is primarily the exact same. We'll talk about the offense in a bit more detail here in a little bit, but I think we should actually start off on the opposite end and focus more on the defensive side of things, because let me just kind of break it down to you. This defense was not good at all last year. When you look at the numbers, this team ranked 32nd in opponents' points per game, 32nd in opponents' yards per game, 32nd in opponents' points per play, 32nd in opponents' yards per play, 32nd on opponent third down conversion rate, 20th in fourth down conversion rate, 29th in red zone scoring percentage, and 32nd in opponents' touchdowns per game. You look even further down here, 32nd in basically every single rushing statistic, and when you look at the passing department, it's a little bit better, but not too good. Like any of the statistics that actually kind of give you a clue of how good the secondary was. 26th in opponent completion percentage, 25th in opponent pass yards per game, 25th in opponent interception thrown rate, and they ranked 5.69, which is the 28th worst in sack percentage. So this team was just not good at all on defense. Now, I do think it's important that we do throw a bit of a caveat out there. If Derrick Brown was healthy, I do think the numbers could potentially be a little bit better, but I don't think it would be game-changingly better. Like, I think Derrick Brown is a fantastic player who definitely would have made an impact on the team, but he wouldn't have made this defense like a top 20 defense just by having one singular player. With that said, he is a fantastic player who can help this team tremendously next year. But yeah, this defense, it needed a upgrade in a lot of different positions, and I think they've done a fine job. Now, I don't think they've done an outstanding job by no means. I think they could have done better, but I think they've done a fine job of kind of shoring up some spots here and there and kind of building the team going in the right direction. You start off with the defensive line here, and obviously A'Shawn Robinson, Shai Tuttle, Derrick Brown, DJ Wanham, that kind of appears to be, oh, and of course Jadeveon Clowney too, that kind of appears to be your look up front who you're going to be throwing out there. You also do have Tershawn Horton, who they brought in, who I don't know if he's going to be a full-time starter, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's somebody who gets a lot of playing time and maybe ends up becoming a starter. Tershawn is not a good run stuffer. I mean, he's just not. So if you expect Tershawn Horton to come in there and make some plays against the run, it's just not really his forte. He's more of a true pass rushing guy. Last year at the Chiefs, he had around 7 sacks, and if you go on PFF, you can see that he grades at a 44.3 run defense grade, but a 68.3 pass rush grade, 7 sacks, 18 solo tackles, 5 assisted tackles, and 1 forced fumble. Again, this kind of gets back to the point of the fact that Tershawn isn't somebody who's going to be stepping in there and stuffing the run and doing anything like that. Like, he is a bona fide pass rusher. Maybe he's only going to be down on second and third downs. I don't really see him being out there on first downs very often, which is okay because you do have Shai Tuttle. You also brought in Bobby Brown, who's a really good run stuffer, averages around a 68, 67 run defense grade, which is not bad at all. And then Derrick Brown is also really good against the run too. So the interior of that defensive line with Bobby Brown, Shai Tuttle, and Derrick Brown feels like it did get better, especially with just Derrick Brown being healthy against the run. So I do expect those numbers to be better, but I don't expect them to just change overnight. You also do bring in Christian Roseboom, who I think is also really going to help. Now, Christian isn't a complete game changer by no means. He's a very reliable, consistent linebacker who is, again, not necessarily a big-time playmaker, but is going to play a lot of snaps, will get you a lot of tackles, and just be very solid. Like, this guy's not going to flash on paper too often, but typically you're going to see this guy as a reliable starter who maybe isn't your long-term answer, but can help you in that spot in the immediate now. You pair that with Josie Jewell, and hopefully that you get some development with Trevin Wallace, because he was okay last year in flashes, but definitely not against the run. He did not look good out there. So you're hoping that he progresses quite nicely in what will be year 2 for him. And if you can expect that, then I do expect this front 7 to be somewhat better next year. Now, again, I want to make it clear that I don't expect this team to go from being a bottom 5 defense, especially especially against the run, to now becoming like a top 10 run stuffing defense. Like, I don't expect that, but I do expect this team to take a step forward, which kind of gets back to the point of the video that the team is trending in the right direction. Now, when you look at the secondary for this team, it's essentially a very similar secondary to what you saw last year with just some new safeties. Mike Jackson, J.C. Horn, Shaw Smith-Wade. That's basically what you had last year. So if you weren't a fan of the secondary last year, especially the cornerbacks, you probably won't be a fan of it this year. I think it's good enough to get by, but definitely I'd like to see an upgrade at the cornerback 2 spot at some points. Now, Damani Richardson comes in there, and I think he's a very solid, strong safety. I have no issues with him being a starter. The big one for me is Trevon Moehrig. I'm a huge fan of Trevon Moehrig. He's been great for the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, via PFF here, 67.5 overall grade, 70.1 pass rush grade. In the run defense department, this guy is going to help you out a ton. 87.5 run defense grade and a 54.4 coverage grade. We look back in 2023's coverage grade was a little bit better, so do take that into account here. Again, 2022, not so much. 77.7 in his rookie year, so a little bit inconsistent in coverage, but definitely do think you can rely on this guy, especially if you want to put him in more of a strong safety role. He definitely can play that position quite well. And for anyone interested, this is Damani Richardson, 60.1 overall grade, 58.6 coverage grade, 66.9 run defense grade, played 403 snaps last year, so he can also play pretty well as well. So again, this kind of gets back to the main point that I want to get across with this defense here. It's not a great defense. The defense didn't go from being probably the worst in the NFL to being somewhat decent. Like, this defense is still going to be probably below 20, like bottom 20 in the league, but that's okay because this team is still developing. It's not the expectation that this team is going to go in there and make the playoffs in what is going to be year 3 of Bryce Young now. Like, this team needs time to develop. It's still developing on offense, so I think we have to give this defense some time to also develop. I expect this 2025 draft to be a very heavy defensive class. I'm talking defensive linemen, getting some pressure on the quarterback, depth in the secondary, depth in the linebacking core. Like, I expect a full-on defensive draft in this year's class. Maybe with one offensive player. I would not be shocked if they go receiver in round 1, so do keep that in mind, but we'll talk about that in here in a second. But just expect a big-time defensive haul to add more pieces to this defense, to add more stuffers, add more guys in coverage. Just give this team more options to work with, because I think right now they're starting to grow in options, but they still need more options to really throw out there a good defense next year. And again, I think the defense is heading in the right direction. Still needs some work though. But then we look at the offense here, and obviously the offense is basically the exact same. In fact, it is basically the exact same. The only big addition here is Rico Dowell, who, by the way, had 1,000 yards last year for the Dallas Cowboys, who didn't really have a great offensive line, so take that as you will. My big complaint for this offense is that I still think the receiving core needs more work. It just feels like right now they're going to put a lot of stock in Xavier Legette, and even though Legette did not have the worst years, by no means, 497 yards as a rookie is not the worst thing in the world. Obviously, first round pick, granted, pick 32, so you have a bit more higher expectations, but I'm definitely not willing to give up on him yet. I just think this team would be really smart to go ahead and try and get ahead of the curve here, because Adam Thielen's getting older at this stage of his career, probably downhill at this point, even though he still plays incredibly well. You just have to have the expectation that within the next 2-3 years, he's probably not going to be the same guy that he was, 1 or 2 years ago. And then Xavier Legette, I don't know if he can truly ever become this team's go-to wide receiver 1. I like his skill set. I liked him out of college. I never saw him as a first round pick. I saw him more as a day 2 option, of course. Pick 32, it's the last pick of the first round, so take that as you will. I didn't hate the pick at the time, but at the same time, I do think this team would be very wise to look at other receiving options. By the way, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, some other guys, they're all still on free agency. Maybe you look at one of those guys, or maybe you look at the first round and maybe pick up a Tetairoa McMillan, a Luther Burden, a Emeka Egbuka, something along those lines. So just give this team more options in the offense, especially in the receiving core, because you look at the other options like Tommy Tremble, Jatavion Sanders at the tight end position. You do expect those guys to take steps forward, especially Jatavion Sanders as more of a pass catching threat, and I do think that will help out Bryce Young a lot. But primarily in the receiving core right now, you're working with Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, who I think is a good player, but I don't know if he'll ever develop to be a true wide receiver 1, if even a 2. I think he's more of a third option. So you're really banking on Xavier Legette to really pan out, and I just think that's a risky bet to take. So again, when you look at the running back room, when you look at the offensive line, I feel great about it. Last year the offensive line took a huge step forward, and I expected it to continue to develop next year and get even better. Chuba Hubbard had a really good year last year. You're now throwing Rico Dowell, so I think the running game has two legitimate threats and a long-term option with Jonathan Brooks when he comes back from his injury, which then brings us to the Bryce Young conversation because, and Bryce Young has had a very interesting start to his career. Like, it's truly been a complete roller coaster. By no means has he lived up to the first overall pick, especially when Stroud went number 2. But we saw flashes last year of a quarterback that looked like he was progressing big time. In 2023, in 16 games played, he only had less than 3,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 picks. But then last year, even in a shorter amount of time played, had about 2,400 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 9 picks. And those last like 7 or 8 weeks that he played, it looks like Bryce Young was becoming the quarterback that we expected him to be coming out of college. Does he still have limitations to his game? Yes, 1000%. He's still on the shorter end. He doesn't have the greatest arm in the world. But man, like, this dude in a rhythm is really solid. Like, I thought that version of him out of Alabama would translate more easily to the NFL level. And it hasn't quite done so quite yet to the fullest extent. But again, last year we saw major glimpses of him going up against really good competition and pushing those teams to the limit and actually performing at a very high level. This is his game log from last year. Obviously, you can see a whole lot of L's and you see a couple more W's here as the season progresses. You can see early on, I mean, it was as bad as it can get. He gets benched during some of these games, really poor. I mean, he starts the season off with no touchdowns through 4 games, 3 picks, of course, gets benched before these 2. But then after that, like, he played really well down the stretch of the season. He had 3 touchdowns against Atlanta, no picks, 2 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2 against the Cardinals. Like, was he playing as a top 5 quarterback in the league? No, but he looked a lot better in these games. And even when he came back from that benching and had these kind of, okay games, like, you saw the flashes of what he could potentially become. But after the, after the 3rd of, what was this, November? I mean, he really took off and really took a lot of big steps forward. You can see he didn't get sacked a whole bunch, only 29 on the season. And if you are a Panthers fan, that is kind of the bet that you're hedging right now, is that Bryce Young is going to continue to develop under the system of their, of course, new head coach. So if he can continue to develop within the system and really start to form into the guy that we saw at Alabama, this team could be somewhat decent next year. Now, again, I want to make it fully transparent and clear here. I don't think the Panthers are making the playoffs in 2025. I just think there's too many good teams in the NFC. And right now, this Panthers team still feels like it's 1 or 2 years away from really getting into serious contention mode to try and make a playoff push. But I look at this offense and I think that you finally have some pieces you feel secure about. You feel okay about the offensive line. You feel great about your running back room. You have some receiving options now. I still think you need a go-to guy, but you have Jalen Coker. You're excited about what Leggett can turn into, and you feel okay about Bryce Young after the end that he had last year. You're just hoping that it continues and that he gets better and better. And defensively, if you are healthy, you have foundational pieces like Derek Brown, J.C. Horn. I love the pickup of Trevon Moehrig, and I think there's some pieces now that you can work with. You hope that DJ Wanham can continue to develop in his skill set because he had a decent year last year for the Panthers. So if you can expect this team to take steps forward, have a good draft class, and if you could just have a couple guys play a little bit better than what they've typically done, then this team can be somewhat good next year. Again, full transparency, don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I think they will be I don't know how many wins they had last year. They had 5 wins last year, which was a big time step forward. I'm projecting 7-8 wins next year. If they can get to 9 wins plus, that will be a massive year for the Carolina Panthers and a really good sign of what's to come for this team. Again, there's still things that need to be worked out. I think this draft is massive for this team moving forward because I think they have to address the receiver. They have to continue to shore up the defense. But man, I think a nice influx of talent could get this team heading in the right direction, which is ultimately what you want to see from a team like Carolina, who last year had, what was it? I guess the number 1 pick. I guess they traded for it, but still had the number 1 pick, and this year has a top 10 pick. You're hoping that next year you can kind of get out of that consistent pattern of taking top 10 picks. Maybe you make a push for the playoffs late into next year. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe you get close to 8 to 9 wins next year. And then, man, 2026, if you expect Bryce Young to still be the guy, this team could be pretty nice because they have a good offensive line and they're just missing a few pieces. And if this team could take some steps forward in certain directions, I think this team is, it's not, again, I don't want to overhype it, but I think this team is going in a place that I feel like they have a good trajectory right now. Like, you don't want to be a team that doesn't have a plan or doesn't have progress or, again, doesn't have a good trajectory. Like, you look at the Saints, for example. That's a team with no trajectory. I don't know what they're doing. Look at the Cowboys. They're going down. A lot of other teams that are just kind of floating in midair, like the Miami Dolphins, right? This is a Panthers team that's very clear and obvious that they're going up right now, and all you're expecting is just Bryce Young has to hit, has to get better. But if that happens, I think this team could be pretty good within a couple years. So you guys let me know in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers? How many wins will they get next year? Let me know in the description, or let me know in the comments. Sorry. Love you guys. Peace.